And I'll do the intro like last time for the mental health part.
Okay, so it says upcoming on the stream, so it's live. But do you know how I get actually do I have to click present or something? Do I
It's
have to come up
live on YouTube right now.
Right
You just have
now.
to go
Yeah,
back to the
we're
Brady
on.
button.
Yeah, we're on, right?
Oh, you just can't hear us.
Waiting for
Yeah.
everybody else to join.
All right.
We have to be all on the stage, and we're good to go.
Should I put us on stage?
Yeah, put us on stage. It's live on YouTube right now.
Hello. Hey, everybody. Thanks for being here on our second official live stream with an actual, subject. We're going to revisit mental health again in VetMed. We have the usual people. I really appreciate you guys being here. Mark Massaro, Dr. Mark, Dr. Bill Sinclair, Dr. Adele Williams, Chris Semblay supporting us here as well. And then our special guest, Emily Carveth. She's a social worker in VetMed, and we're super happy to have her here. Actually met her through Suzanne Thomas, which had something come up, couldn't be here right now, but I'm going to be asking her some questions that were sent by her. And, first, I want to say that most of us here are not mental health professionals. We're just people that have been through a lot of stuff in VetMed, and I feel like with our experience, we can kind of help bring practical advice and practical ways to handle the stressful situations at work. And that's why I'm so glad we have Emily here, that I'm sure she can help us navigate through those problems and have practical solutions for them. So I'm not going to talk much more. I'm going to just let Emily take it from here. Just kind of tell us what do social workers and VetMeds do? What's kind of like a normal day for you?
Oh, yeah, that's a great question. So I'll tell you a little bit first about what it's like. So most veterinary social workers that are in practice right now are what we call embedded veterinary social worker, and that's when a VSW is on staff at a veterinary hospital, or a veterinary teaching hospital. I want to say there's a VSW or an equivalent at all of the veterinary schools in the United States at this point. I think it's getting close to there. But when I was an embedded VSW, every day looked kind of different, because technically all of the staff of the hospital and all of the clients of the hospital could be my client at any point. So some of the things that I would do pretty much daily would be interact with the staff and just kind of take a temperature and see how everybody was doing. So make my rounds through the hospital, see if there were any emergent cases that, folks would want to get a social worker to get involved with. I also had a little office where staff members and clients could come speak with me privately. So a lot of what I did, actually a lot of my work, and it was a work that I really loved, was providing short-term counseling for staff of the hospital. So sometimes most of the time that was on an individual basis, and it was like, hey, if my door is open, come on in, let's talk. And often what that would look like is I would see them for and I would treat it like a full therapy session. It's like, hey, you've got up to an hour or more with me, especially in a crisis situation. It's like, I will earmark my time for you, but I would also help them get connected to a counselor for long-term support if we felt like that's what they needed. Sometimes that was me interacting with the hospital's EAP, because they did have one set up for their employees, and that's a great service to offer. Helping the staff get to know the EAP and because a lot of what I've noticed, a little bit of a side tangent, is a lot of veterinary hospitals that have an EAP in place, the staff is not necessarily aware of what that kind of program is and the range of resources that are available to them. So sometimes it was that. I would also see clients for individual short-term counseling, mostly around pet loss. Sometimes it was after the pet had passed. Sometimes it was what we call anticipatory grief counseling. So folks who are anticipating the upcoming loss of their pet and want to talk about things like end of life planning and how to find support after their pet passes. Along those lines, I ran 2 free groups for clients of the hospital. One was for pet loss, and the other one was for pet caregivers, for those pet parents whose pets are experiencing chronic or debilitating illnesses that really need caregiver support. Because I noticed that there wasn't a lot of resources in that particular space for clients. So those were great. And then the last big thing that I did was provide educational seminars on things like conflict diffusion, communication techniques, well-being resources. Sometimes I would bring in guest speakers on things related to staff mental health, and that was also really rewarding. So nowadays, that's what a typical day is like for an embedded VSW. Nowadays, I have my own business as a veterinary social worker. I'm a full-time therapist working for a group practice, but my little business, Boop, I offer non-therapy veterinary social work services to veterinary teams. And mostly what that's looked like is my educational courses. I have 2 race-approved courses. One is on communication techniques and self-regulation techniques and how to pair those together for staff to improve communication with their clients, especially during tough situations. And then the other one is developing trauma awareness for veterinary professionals, how trauma impacts them, how it can impact their clients, normalizing some of the things that veterinary professionals go through and experience in terms of their mental health, specifically related to trauma. Because that's a passion of mine, is trauma-informed care. So that's what my life looks like at this point.
I have a couple
Adele,
questions.
I think last time
Okay,
we
you go.
I just wanted to see if we could start with some like real life things that happen at work, right? That we could like kind of dissect, like we said before, right, Mark?
Oh, cool.
And shed light on these specific problems. And we were talking last time about the main 5 things that we think that affect mental health and maybe lead to those, situations of high anxiety and stress that we would need Emily for, right? Things that you think are the main things you've seen in practice, Adele?
Mm-hmm.
You're asking me about the main things I see in practice.
Yeah, the things that you think affect
As
mental health,
a big question for me to start with. I think the time pressure and the sway of different things you see between one consult and another. So I'm thinking primarily of when I have consulted as a locum in first opinion small animal practice, and you have 10 or 15-minute appointments, 20 if it's a real luxury, and you have to pivot from consult to consult to consult, from sort of really happy consults where somebody's got a new pet, a puppy or a kitten, and talking about their life choices for that pet and the future excitement, to the next minute there's a pet that's really sick, and you've got to try and figure out what's wrong with it, and you've got to also deal with the emotions of the people that are associated with that, as well as hold it all together for yourself and make sure you do a good job. And I think there's a huge pressure of swing, particularly in that kind of situation where you're going from one thing to another, and you maybe have a consult slot of 4 hours, so it's non-stop. How do people cope with that?
That's an amazing question. And it's really challenging, right? Because of how packed everything is. So I'll share a couple of things. One of the things I realized through my own work as a vet, because I used to be a veterinary assistant and a vet tech before, and a veterinary, like a CSR for a long time. And that was something I always thought about myself, like we have no time to really like slow down in between appointments. Sometimes you are literally leaving one room and walking straight into the next room. So something I've started to work with myself that's been helpful for me as a therapist, especially when I have like kind of my back-to-back stuff, is finding what I would call micro practices to support your nervous system, things that you are very portable, that you can take on the go quickly. So I'll demonstrate some stuff. This may look, and it's going to look a little silly sometimes if you're doing it in front of people, but it's going to sound wacky, but one of the most helpful things a person can do for themselves quickly in between the appointments is literally letting their body move and shake. Like I am like doing the thing where I'm like wiggling. I joke with my therapy clients. I'm like, you know, those inflatable tube guys in front of the car dealerships that are like, that.
Yeah, I know exactly. My neighbor has one to scare away the birds of prey from her chickens. She has one of those big things just in her yard. It's pretty crazy.
Yeah.
But that's a good. Yeah, I like that. That kind of feels good.
It is helping your body complete the stress cycle. That was a huge topic that I came across through Emily Nagoski's book, Burnout, which is awesome. Highly recommend it. We oftentimes don't get to finish the stress response that builds up in our bodies from going to thing to thing to thing. And one of the things that can help our body metabolize all the stress hormones that builds up through like being exposed to primary and secondary trauma all day long is movement of some kind, even if it's brief. And the other thing I was thinking of is this was very helpful for me when I was the embedded VSW because I attended a lot of euthanasias. And so it was such an honor to do so. And so often I would be with the family prior to, during, and after the euthanasia, providing support. And something I noticed coming up in me a lot was my own grief response. Very normal, you know, especially if, say, a pet that I was being with the family was very similar to my own, it would really trigger that big upswell of grief. And it's always such a tender thing for veterinary professionals because like it's a tension of how much do we let our own grief come forward? How much do we share in an emotional experience with these clients that are going through often the worst thing? It's their worst day. And it's okay. And first off, I want to normalize when the tears start flowing because it means you're an empathic, caring human. And also for my role at the time, it made sense to be, okay, let me titrate that a little bit. So a mental practice I would do is say to myself, like, I'm literally talking to my emotion, my own grief. I'm like, hey, I see you. I hear you. I recognize you. I know why you're here, and it means you care. Right now, I can't attend to you, but I promise I'm going to make time for you later. And so I would always pair that with some sort of like body-based self-soothing. Because the self-talk talks to this part, like our prefrontal cortex, our logic part of our brain. But then there's the back parts of our brain, like our hindbrain that words don't really work with. So pairing it with some sort of soothing touch on the body was helpful for me in those moments. So it's like I could go and be with that family and be the emotional support they needed, knowing that I was going to make time for myself later to have the full expression of the grief I was feeling. Not always easy. Sometimes that happens much later in the day when you're home, you know. Yeah. But so that's a whole other.
I think it's important to acknowledge that it's normal to feel a certain way, and we're not robots, and it's going to happen, and kind of expect to kind of be involved in that emotional moment with them. You know, it's kind of part of why we're vets anyway. We're not vets because we are okay disconnecting. It's actually because we want to connect. So expecting that feeling is important, to acknowledge that and embrace it, you know. I don't know, Bill, do you feel that way when you know, in that moment, how do you deal with that? Like, is it like a big deal to you when you're with the family there? Like, how do you go about that?
It's always hard. It has not gotten easier as I've done this longer. It has definitely gotten harder as I've done more and more. I used to do a lot of in-home euthanasias, and I've all but stopped. I had one really bad one that I just wish I'd walked away from. Like, I wish I had nothing to do. Yeah. And that was a couple of years ago, and I'm thinking about starting it again. But it's
Yeah.
never easy. I mean, there's a couple of times when you at least feel like it's the right. Most of the time you feel like it's the right thing to do, right? Like,
Yep.
there's nothing we can do, right? This is it.
Mhm.
I say it's not the worst thing in the world. It's just the second worst thing in the world. And the worst thing in the world is watching them die, right? Like, is watching them pass away. I always tell this story talking about euthanasia, but my grandmother ran a beauty shop for like 40 years, which was a big deal for a woman born in the 1920s, right? Owning her own business. But she, even into her 80s, she, as she delicately put it, did heads at the mortuary. Like, she
Oh.
did people's hair
Mhm.
for their funeral. I was like, what are you doing? Like, you don't need the money. You don't need to do this. What are you, like, they're not like social companionship. Like, why are you doing this? And she said it's the last nice thing she could do for somebody.
Yeah.
Oh,
And that's something
Okay.
that always got me about euthanasia. Like, the last
Mhm.
nice thing we can do for them is to help them,
Yep.
is to, like, gently and with dignity say goodbye.
Yeah.
That's really what that memory has bolstered me many
Mhm.
times.
That makes sense.
And sometimes I feel like kind of, part of the moment, and they expect that too, right? They kind of expect you to just kind of embrace the moment and just be that person that ends their life in a nice way, right? As a family doctor of their pet, and
Mhm.
I think that for me, the hard ones, like Bill said, it's sometimes it's not the right thing, and it's not the right thing, and you might be like kind of questioning what's going on, and
Yeah.
in different scenarios, like Bill, for example, owns his own clinic. I don't know, Adele, when you were practicing, if that ever happened to you, where
Mhm.
you were kind of put in a position where, well, this is your job, right? This is the owner. The owners want this. You need to do this. Go ahead. Push them.
Yeah, I mean,
Medicine.
that does happen on occasion, John, and I can think of a few times when I've really not necessarily agreed with the owner's decision.
Mhm.
And I think
Mhm.
the difficulty in that situation is also the other staff that are working with you, the techs and the vet nurses and the support staff. I'm majority worked in equine practice, so I'd always have someone else at least holding the horse for me
Sure,
and
have to.
preparing stuff. And you have to support them through it as well. So you're not just carrying yourself, you're carrying other people, and sort of
Mhm.
saying to them, look, I know we don't agree with this, but we are stopping suffering with this horse, and
Mhm.
that we have to take comfort in that, and we have to remain professional. And it's a difficult load to carry, certainly.
Could you, Emily, if you wouldn't mind sharing some other techniques that you found particularly, I don't want to sound churlish when I say the word useful or practical, but like effective that seem to resonate with this, with people who are struggle with this?
Yeah, with with euthanasia or specifically, or like, because I keep thinking, especially like what you were just sharing, Adele, is the whole concept of moral injury. I think sometimes doesn't get talked about enough in vet med, and folks might not be aware of what that actually means and what it is.
I'm already very interested in that phrase. If you want
Okay.
to look at that, like, oh, that's the one I'm
So-
going to write down right now. Yeah.
So moral injury is what happens when the decisions of another do not align with the person's values or morals. And that happens all the time in veterinary medicine. It happens to all levels of staff. Anyone can be infected. What I really noticed, and my nurses that I was working with were great at reflecting this back to me. It's often the nurses and the vets, they really feel the brunt of moral injury because they're often the people doing the hands-on nursing care. And so they're seeing how various decisions on the part of the owners are directly impacting that animal. So that can be a really difficult thing. And I think part of it, is bringing even awareness that this language exists for people to describe how they feel. Because I think a lot of times in vet med, there still is a stigma, like we got to keep it all in, we got to lock it all up in the effort of being professionals. It's like, no, we need to be able to talk about this. So one thing that's been talked about a lot in the veterinary social work field is this is a more of a systemic approach for folks, is building in something like balance groups, which is something that exists in human medicine, where it's an opportunity for folks to get together to discuss ethical conflicts that come up in cases during the week, or however often they week, like once a month, however often they decide to meet. And that's not an easy process to set up. It's a whole thing, but having some sort of setup, whether it's a mentorship program or a peer support program, or providing folks access to known peer resources. And I can talk about what's out there in that space, that folks can talk to someone who knows what they're going through, who gets it. I would dare to say for most veterinary professionals, that ends up being incredibly meaningful and helpful. Is like, I know I can go to talk to someone who absolutely understands what I'm feeling. And I just noticed that there's a comment that came in. I think it would actually be great to speak to in this moment. Sometimes it's hard to just even think about self-soothing in the moment. You're so valid in saying that. Would there be any benefit to prepare before the secondary trauma event? Like if you know a euthanasia is coming in. I think that's a great point. Some of the self-regulation, I'm going to show you guys a couple of things. You didn't know you were going to see a demonstration today, but this is a self-holding.
That's perfect. Yeah.
This is a self-holding technique that my teacher, Linda Tai, taught me. It's just a way to like kind of soothe your body either in the moment or prior. I think that's a great idea. So here's the technique. It's going to look a little funny. You take your hand and put it under your armpit. So now this arm is enclosed and is applying deep pressure touch to your body. And it's like a boundary for you. And then the other arm can wrap and come over the shoulder, like in a nice tight hug. But you have some options of what you can do with this hand now. And often what I like to do is, like, if I have a chance to sit and lean my elbow against something, I'm just going to rest my head in my hand. So dropping the weight of the head. We carry so much tension in our heads and necks and shoulders as people and vet med folks. So sometimes just dropping the weight into our hand feels really good. We also have a lot of touch receptors in our cheeks and foreheads. And so sometimes like taking your fingers and doing a gentle stroke of your cheek can feel really good. Like caregivers often do this with little babies, instinctively. And it's like, these are times you can baby yourself, like in a good way, if that makes sense. So I'm like soothing my forehead, that kind of stuff. I love little practices like that. And checking in with your body before an anticipated event like this to see if your body is like asking for something. That's a very simplified explanation, but it's a process called interoception, of kind of scanning your body internally, like, what's going on? Like, am I feeling something in my chest? Does my stomach hurt? Is my heart racing? Do I feel sweaty? That can often inform what you might need before the event. So for some people, it's like they need to jog in place for a little bit and do the shakeout and stuff. And some people need a more tender form of touch, whether it's like letting their body rock back and forth. Oh, that's so cool. That's something that gave me immediate self-soothing. Yeah, I love that technique. I wish I had come up with it, but it's my teacher, Linda Tai. She's amazing. If I could teach everyone in vet med her methods, I would be so happy.
And I guess that counts for.
So those are just a couple of little
I think
things.
that for not only for euthanasia or any stressful moment, anything that stresses you out,
Mm-hmm. Yeah. These are pretty applicable for basically any situation where your body feels like it's in need of comfort or support, because even even good stress is still stress. Like, say if someone gets really excited for a new puppy appointment, but they're nervous about doing the puppy kit. Like, I know I did a lot of puppy kits. I would get nervous as heck for those appointments, but excited. That's still a lot of energy coming into the nervous system.
I think that's a really good insight to talk about. Like, even if you love your job, even if it's good, even if it's like too much of it is not good for you. Like,
we got to let our bodies
you need
discharge
you need a
this in
certain
some
amount
way.
of it to function. Like cortisol is a great example. Like too much is a problem, too little is a problem.
Yeah.
Too much for too long is also a problem.
Yeah. So sometimes, yeah, you're right. Sometimes folks can really struggle after like a particular happy event because there can be lots of mixed emotions, but it's a lot of charge in the nervous system. And even like after, a really, really great day where you crushed it, people still might need to do some stuff to help their body finish that cycle of stress.
That's an interesting analogy as well. And we've talked about that before on here is like, just because you can do something doesn't mean you can do it an unlimited number of times. Like if you could deadlift 300 pounds, you're like, yeah, but can you do it 10 times, 100 times, 1,000 times? Like eventually you break down doing it. And you need to build in that recovery, and you can't just muscle through and be like, no, I'm fine. It's like at some point you're not anymore.
Yeah. And oh boy, I think that's such a valid thing to point out. And that could even be a whole conversation in and of itself of how do we let our team members have opportunities to do that, to recover and finish. So that's a big conversation. I know.
I think it's an important one. And it's something we don't talk about a lot in vet med, but they talk about a lot in business courses. Like there's a paper, I think it was from Sloan, about like when like for example, they use the private equity example. Private equity like buys a business. They want that business operating at 100% capacity all the time. But we don't, right? Like sometimes we're at 120% and sometimes we're at 80%. And if we're always at 100, there's no space for the other stuff, right? Like there's no recovery time, and there's no time to do the extraordinary when you have to.
Right. I think that's a beautiful thing for managers, anyone who's in charge of schedulers, anyone who's in charge of scheduling. And I know this is really much easier said than done, because you're right. There is always that veterinary hospitals are still a business. They're still an income generating thing. And so it's really hard to be like, when are we going to build in any kind of rest breaks for our team members? But knowing that is so critically needed. And so I really feel this, like, and anyone who's in a management role, one beautiful gift they can give their staff, and you're probably going to get pushback from your staff for doing this, is insisting that they take their breaks. Like it's a non-negotiable. There's going to be times where it's a lot harder to do that. Say if you're all in a surgery, that's a really difficult situation. But like as a general rule, we got to build in some time for our team members. So like go to the bathroom and eat food and, or sit for 5 minutes and do nothing,
I insist on it. And I've at least once a year, if not twice a year, I give my technicians and staff a speech about like people literally died, like went to war so that against their own, like to get the right to take breaks and sit down and have lunch and not work 80 hours a week and not be exploited. Like don't disrespect that. Like honor that. Like I want you guys, I don't want you operating at maximum capacity 100% of the time. Like that's not what this is. Knowledge work as much as service work, right? And if you don't have the time to sit and think, this is going to start to slip.
I think it's also really important that people take their holidays, their annual leave breaks as well, because people are really good at not booking anything, and then it's all gone for the year. And I think that's a really important thing for management, to insist that people plan in advance and tell them when they're going, and then make sure that they do go and take their leave and they switch off as well. And doing things like making sure that they're and I'm really bad for doing this, making sure your emails, have a return on them saying I'm not available, I'm on annual leave, I'm not working right now. Otherwise you can just slip into just still being connected to work all the time, and you never get a proper brain break.
We talked about this on the last call, that it's kind of like almost, I can't speak to other industries, but it's kind of part of our culture in veterinary medicine. Like Bill was talking about this, that like we don't take days off, and that we're always in the, what if one of my clients calls and has a problem, or what if somebody needs to be squeezed in? And I like what you said, Adele, about like management really taking the onus on to not just slap a contract down that says you get so many weeks or unlimited. I didn't learn about the whole trap of unlimited PTO, the fact that people take less PTO when they have unlimited than when they have 3 weeks. But to say, and I've worked for companies that have done this, it is really important to us that you take the time off. Because I think when you don't say those things, people naturally don't use all of their time off. And it's really important. It might be also slightly an American thing as well. I feel like other countries are better about this than we are.
It's very American
that
thing.
We don't. We might go 2-3 years in a row and never actually take an actual vacation. And that's like just not a good way to live.
There's a reason for that. There's a guy named, it's called Taylorism. Like it's scientific management. I think it was a guy doing ironworking. Like he wanted people who were dumb, who were going to work as hard as they could and then drop. And he was wildly successful in ironworking, but he was contemptuous of his workers. He was disgusted by them. He wanted as much out of them and as he could possibly get. And it was very profitable and became very popular and was taught at the business schools in the early 20th century. And it's not, I mean, I don't think it's suited for anything, but it's really not suited for a veterinarian's knowledge work.
Right. Yeah. And I think one of the unspoken things that can happen, I did see this dynamic play out a good bit at the place where I was, is when everyone's burned out, when everyone's been running on max capacity for way too long. And I'm thinking of my management folks too. One of the things that starts to happen is when your body is worn out and when you've been repeatedly exposed to trauma, your worldview changes. And so what that can look like is management, team members thinking that way about their team members, that they are my enemy, that they are a problem, that they are trying to make my job more difficult. I wish that is one of the quiet things that I think we need to start saying the quiet part out loud. And, in hindsight, I was embedded VSW, my first job out of grad school. There would have been so many more things that I wanted to do to help folks kind of unpack, like, hey, let's get curious about why you feel that way about your staff. Maybe why your team members feel that way about you, that you're looking to punish them, that you're looking to make their jobs harder. Most of the time, that's not the case. We're a bunch of really compassionate and empathetic people that come into the field. But you're right. We get run like a car that runs on fumes. And you know what happens? You can run the car on fumes for a good bit. I know I've pushed that too hard in my own car. Eventually, the car is going to stop and break down. And then you got to refill it with gas before it can even start again.
Right. So I've noticed that something that maybe happens a lot in different clinics I worked at is that we tend to not communicate our boundaries effectively, and not feel, sometimes I myself have felt like, well, if I say no to something, it's just I'm being lazy, right? And that's, I think, the way we were talking last time, we were brought up in vet school, like pushing ourselves to the limit because it's part of it, it's what you do, and shut up and do it. And that has created a culture of shut up and do it, and no boundaries in terms of like what is too much, right? Like Bill was saying, like, okay, I can do this real heavy thing once, but that's it. And it's up to us to communicate that with the staff, because sometimes they don't know what's too much for you as an individual. And I think a lot of it is knowing what you are capable of and what's healthy for you, and then communicating that to the team, and very specifically, right? And not because I'm mad or I'm in a bad mood, but because that's the boundaries that we have set before. So we all expect that that's it, that's the limit, and we're not guessing or having more variables in our days. And so, I don't know if you can give us tips on how to kind of come out of our shell and communicate our needs and our boundaries with our team members without sounding like, like we're pushing them away or we're being lazy, or, what kind of practical ways to communicate those boundaries?
Yeah, I think, kind of what you were saying, earlier in what you just shared about, I think a lot of it is opening up the conversation and like saying the quiet part out loud in terms of having staff meetings where this is openly talked about. Hey, we're here. Here are us in leadership. We recognize that it might be really hard for you all, the team members on like, say, lower levels of staff, to come to us to ask you for what you need. I saw the comment come in, like how to approach if they're unsure or timid. I think that's just something for folks in veterinary management to keep in mind, especially when, say, your staff member is like my career nurses that I'm thinking about that have been doing the thing for 20 years. And they've been through the ringer at like 4 other hospitals where that was the expectation, that you never took time off, that you practically peed your pants, that you never drank water. They're going to be scared probably to ask for.
The management and the leaders, that you don't just say like, oh, are you okay? And they're going to go, yeah. You say, we have these ways of like establishing boundaries. How do you want this messaging to come? Do you want an email? Do you want a text? Do you want it during hours? Do you want it after hours? Do you want it with every, like, and you let them say, this is how I want this to be communicated to me.
Yeah.
And then you honor that. And like when they've chosen it and they know that like this is how this comes, and like sometimes it's like they're like, well, just let me know if I'm, if you think there's a problem. It's like, we're having this conversation because there's a problem. But build the structure for them, like, and insist upon it, right? Like, this is something that happens at my hospital when you get hired. Like, when this comes in, we can do it. We can communicate this stuff however you want to communicate it. Here are your options, right? But this is built in.
Yeah.
And this is, and they've chosen it, right? Like, we haven't decided upon it.
Yes.
We kind of gave them a menu, but we open with this, and then we honor it. Then we check in with them and say, like, does this still work for you? Like, you can go and change this for yourself if you like. That's how we've done it. Like, and you say give them an opportunity. It's like, I think you need instructions.
Yes, I love that. I love that. And you're right, getting them involved, empowering them to be a part of policy processes at the hospital.
Would have their own mental health and protection, right? Like,
yeah, because a lot of folks at lower levels of staff, like I'm thinking about my CSRs and vet assistants and kennel staff especially, fundamentally do not feel empowered and don't feel like they're part of the decision-making process when it comes to policy change at the hospital. And now that I've been very blessed to the group, I work for a group therapy practice. Like, there's like a bunch of us therapists under one roof. We are heavily involved in policy change. And just being a part of that and knowing how empowering that is, being like, my voice matters, because it does. You're all part of the system.
I think, the same can be said for the junior vets as well. I remember as an intern hiding in the bathroom to eat a sandwich at like 4 o'clock in the afternoon because I'd not had anything since 7 a.m. And being terrified of
doing that once and
as not pulling my weight and not being there because it was so busy. So it's got to consider all members of staff, right, in this.
Yeah. Yeah.
We've got some comments
Mhm.
coming in. So Emily, the pinned comment, could you explain how someone would approach you for help if they're unsure or timid? I mean, that's a great question, isn't it?
That is such a good question. And, the first thing that popped into my mind is like, if you have a veterinary social worker on staff, they are kind of that great person to start with. Of that is actually something often that would happen, is especially like really new folks to the team would come to me because they'd feel really scared to advocate for themselves. And it's like, okay, let's identify, because there's going to be folks on your team, regardless of which team it is, there's going to be some folks that really naturally love to mentor people and support people. And there's going to be some folks that are not interested in doing that. And that's okay. Like, everybody's different in that way. But if we can like kind of identify like, who are our people that other staff members feel safe with, they might be a great kind of first point of contact for someone. And so if that's really spoken about, like, hey, maybe it's a peer that's like loves to, here, take my hand, let's go to the manager's office to talk about taking time off. I could think that would be very helpful. And in terms of like a personal technique that I keep coming back to this idea of saying the quiet part out loud for some reason, because we just feel like we have to keep so much hidden in vet med. But one of the things I learned from a mentor of mine was like, if I'm nervous before a conversation, I'm thinking about it. I actually did this the other day before this call because I was feeling nervous. And it's like, hey guys, I'm feeling a little anxious. Are there some questions that you're thinking about asking me ahead of time? And it was very empowering for me to say that out loud of like, oh, okay, I'm just acknowledging like that even though I've been doing this thing for a while, I still get nervous. Here's what would help me. And that was like, and it totally like opened up this whole kind of other level of connection. At least it felt that way on my end. And I was very well supported. So sometimes I'll be like, hey, I'm really nervous to ask this question right now, but can we talk about something? Sometimes that, and that like, if the staff member feels like they can do that, because that's a whole process too of getting to that point where they feel like they can do that. But it's like, oh, it gives the management person in question, like, oh, hey, they're feeling a little scared right now. Maybe I need to take a softer approach or something like that. Yeah, like if that makes sense as a technique. But it's like, I do that all the time now. I'm like, look, I'm actually really anxious about this. Like, can you get a heads up about
Yeah. Well, I think it's good to be a little bit anxious about something new and just do well. Once we start flowing, it's like just having a normal conversation. It's like
Yeah.
just speaking each other's brains and finding out solutions. Hey, Mark, you had a comment there, Mark. Is that something you want to talk about? That point you have there, and then we'll talk to Bill.
Yeah, I wanted to. Sorry, I meant to pin the other one. But
Okay.
you were talking a couple of minutes ago about, you were mentioning friction between management and staff, and management will say something like, God, why are they making my life so difficult? And the staff will be like, why are you punishing us for this or this, the other thing? And this has come up recently in multiple discussions I've had from multiple people. This term toxic, we talk about the toxic employee or the toxic leader, the toxic manager, and that this term is sometimes used as a catch-all. And what we don't always do is say, first of all, let's not just label someone as toxic and leave it at that. But like, why are they acting out? Why are they acting the way they're acting? Is there a solution? Maybe there's not. Maybe they're just not a good fit for this hospital, for this team, whatever. But I feel like sometimes we slap this label on people and we don't like look into the reasons why. So what's your experience with that terminology? I guess is my question.
Yeah. You probably saw by the look on my face, I do not care for that term, toxic. And granted, I have a very strong opinion about depathologizing things for people. Like I have very open, I try to have very open conversations with my own therapy clients about their diagnoses and depathologizing what's happening to them. Because like every action that we take as humans is trying to fulfill a need of some kind. So think about that employee that might be labeled as toxic that is lashing out at their coworkers. You're right. Why? Why might this be happening? Are they going through something in their personal life? Have they been running on fumes for the past 10 years and no one's ever given them permission to take some time off? You know, are they experiencing neurodivergence of some kind, which is very, very common? Like, I think most of us are like neurospicy that are involved in veterinary medicine, you know, and maybe they're having challenges of same. I have ADHD. I have a bunch of.
That's funny because I always say at the clinic, like, we're all in the spectrum here, okay? We're either somewhere in it. So everybody, you know, let's kind of understand each other and kind of, you know, maybe it's a cry for help, the way they act and the way they treat each other, right? Or however they're talking that day. Or maybe they want to be asked how they feel. And why are you, like, something's going on, right? And just from a more, you know, show the same compassion we show to our patients, to our staff members, you know, because we work with them like family. So, you know.
I think, one of the most beautiful gifts that any person in leadership or even just interacting as peers can give another human is curiosity. It was a critical skill for me to learn as a burgeoning therapist, because I used to, you know, like, this is still not a bad thing. Like, I used to be kind of the type, like, I'm just going to sit back and listen. But if you add in curiosity, it changes everything. It's like, then you start to learn so much more about this person and they become more of a fleshed out, nuanced human being than just like, here's the toxic person at our clinic.
Yeah.
We're gonna
so like Mark said, like, it's better to avoid like, you know, like putting them in that shelf of toxic and then, you know, not giving them a chance to figure out why, or, you know, and just saying the thing toxic just creates that toxicity. Just, I think calling them out on it, it's just gonna create it more, you know. So
it's like when you have a bully in school, then it turns out that they have stuff going on at home, or, you know, like you know, you watch PBS, like their parents got divorced and I didn't know, you know, like the classic sitcoms or whatever. I feel like there's an analogy there with, and I don't even think I really necessarily thought about it, but, you know, I've certainly worked in hospitals where it's like the lead technician or a certain veterinarian where it's like, I don't want to work on her shift, or I don't want to work on his shift. And I've worked places where, you know, people would do a working interview and then they would never make it to like working at our hospital because they would get scared away by the toxic employee. It was kind of a known thing in the hospital, like, oh yeah, we know she got, you know, we scared away another one. And it's like, why are we not addressing this? So I love that, like you said, lead with curiosity. And then I know what Bill's going to say about potatoes, right?
No, actually, that's a good one. But I was going to say, from the leadership perspective, there has to be a point where you're protecting your team and you're removing the toxic person. Like, you've given them the opportunity.
At some point, you've given them enough chances.
I agree.
Like,
I do.
And it's a lot sooner than you think it is. I totally
these
agree. These are adults, and if they don't get their act together, they need to be somewhere else. Like, my team does not have 500 people on it where like one person moves the needle a lot. So
well, can you speak to that balance, both of you, Bill and Emily, about, because I've never been the leader of an animal hospital, giving second chances, but then when do you, like, that's got to be tough.
I see it as a fairness issue, and not be like, it is way too easy to be too kind of compassionate, but what you're doing is you're being unfair to your high performers. You are not being fair. And when I heard it in that context, it hit me, because like, you think you're being fair to somebody. What you're doing is being permissive of someone else's bad behavior. And at some point, right? Like, not their first offense, but like their 70th. You are being permissive of their behavior and telling everybody else who works for you that I'm not here to protect you. I'm not here to look out for you. I'm looking out for this one person because they can pass a catheter and I don't want to.
I was
How did you know that person was really good at placing catheters?
They're amazing at it.
I think that's such an amazing, and you were going right where I wanted to go, to like kind of add the caveat, like, It is. It's really tough. And I have to straddle this tension all the time as a therapist of like, how do I hold gently and kindly and with compassion, and also gently or sometimes like a little bit more assertively challenge my clients if needed, because sometimes a challenge is an opportunity to grow. And you're right, it's like you can fully understand and appreciate and like really hold tenderly that nuance of what might be informing someone's behavior, and it's also still okay to have accountability in your teams. And I think Bill's right, it's very critical, because especially what can happen when, say, there is one person in a higher level of staff that is lashing out so often and making it an oppressive environment for other staff members to work in. It will affect your turnover rate. It will affect your retention rate. It will affect your medical care. Like it's going to affect everything. You know, if that person is never addressed, like, hey, like we know that there's some stuff going on, but also these specific, and focus on the behavior, I think is really critical. And that's hard.
I like that. Yeah. Focus on
Is
the
like
behavior, not
you're not attacking the character.
Not your righteous outrage with how this person wronged you. Like,
yeah,
this has this outcome, and I don't like that outcome.
Yeah. Yep. Like, hey, you may very well need support. And like, we get it that it's coming out, but the lashing out or the yelling at staff is affecting your staff in this way. Now they're afraid to come to you if they think they've made a mistake. What if that ends up ending in a loss of life? You know, and I think that's what folks sometimes like miss in the complexities of these conversations. It's really tough.
And that's not being like over exaggerating, right? Like we have a crisis in our field. So it's not exaggerating to say this is life or death. It would be if it was had a stressful day, but we are regularly losing people in our field. So I actually, I just want to say that out loud, that's not, I think maybe people might take that as hyperbole. Oh, you saying, because I had an attitude with so-and-so today, but it's the straw that breaks the camel's back, right? It's like one of the things I wanted to bring up was like the little T versus big T. I had never heard of little T versus big T up until like the past year.
My favorite topic.
And so I wanted to ask you about little T versus big T. Yeah. And then I also see Suzanne Thomas, who's one of our FlareVet leaders, who's amazing, who couldn't make it today. She's dealing with things in her own company, dealing with issues kind of probably similar to this. So little T versus big T, and then also what gives you hope? Like, let's be a little bit more positive, a little bit more optimistic for that we're going to turn this around with mental health and veterinary medicine.
Yeah. Ooh, I love that question. Okay. So first off, I'm going to give a definition of trauma that might like kind of open things up a bit. Trauma. This is not my definition. This is from Janina Fisher, who's a legendary therapist, traumatologist. Trauma is anything that overwhelms the body's ability to cope. That's so broad. So it's really almost, and this is going to sound weird, it's almost not the event itself, it's how it gets wired into your brain and nervous system. So two separate people can experience the same event completely differently based on their vantage point, their own experiences. So when we talk about big T traumas, what we're referring to are the things that people usually think of as traumas, like war, natural disasters, immigration, displacement, loss of life, violence, that kind of stuff. All of that still counts as trauma. But little T traumas are things like relational wounding. So what I call attachment trauma, where there's emotional neglect, emotional abuse, abandonment, things even like ending a friendship, ending a relationship. These all can be very deeply, deeply traumatic things. And I think they're also kind of involved in that. I love to explain the difference between primary and secondary trauma and that veterinary professionals experience both on a daily basis, where primary trauma is like the trauma that happens to you directly. And secondary trauma is witnessing the suffering of another and the impact that that can have. And if you think about it, like veterinary medicine is all day, every day, constantly, unless your practice is nothing but puppy and kitten visits, which, it's not.
Goals.
But, I know goals, right? Like, give me a kitten, every kitten, place them in my hand. But that's, I think that's an important distinction to make too. So really, like, anybody can suffer trauma, and there's a lot of comparative suffering that goes on in vet med. Like, oh, I don't have it as bad as them,
There's also like competitive martyrdom, right? Like, I got it worse than you, right?
So,
like, it's like, but you only work 14 hours and I work 15, so
and it's like,
you should be fine.
Yeah. It's like when Grandpa tells you he used to go to school barefoot for 10 miles, and then that makes you feel better, right?
Uphill both ways. Yeah. Back in my day,
So
But
let's go to
the positivity piece.
oh, what gives you the hope?
Yeah. I want to do that one.
Yeah, let's do that one.
Yeah, and then unfortunately, I'll have to jump after that last question because I'm going to be hopping on a session with one of my clients, which is so cool to be like doing this and then making the transition to that. Conversations like this give me so much hope for the future. There are so many amazing veterinary social workers out there. I got to go to the Veterinary Social Work Summit this past October in Cleveland, and I was crying. Like, it's just like to see not only VSWs, but veterinarians, like other therapists, like people in the trenches of vet med, really interested, like just showing that they care, that folks, like especially folks in veterinary management who care about this stuff, it's like that people are, you're right, literally not surviving their experiences. And so stuff like this has just gives me so much life, and it's really, really meaningful as like a former vet med person turned VSW turned therapist. Thank you for caring enough.
I hate that it had to get there to
I
get
know.
us to like destigmatize. But Adele made this point. Adele is a professor that teaches veterinary students. And she was talking about the different generations and how, like, I love that Gen Z is like, we'll actually talk about these things out loud. Like, it's not weird to talk about mental health out loud anymore.
Yeah.
I love that.
I know I love Gen Z so much in that respect. And they're just they're busting the doors wide open. My Gen Z clients are so funny. They'll be like, yeah, so I told my friend, I'm like, yo, my therapist said this to me. I'm like, oh, they're talking about me. Like, oh wait, that's me. I still have those moments for sure. But yeah, they're great at like just busting down that brick wall that never needed to be there in the first place.
Well, I don't want you to be late to your I would love to.
Oh yeah, we're good. We're like we're right there. So this is good.
Oh, you're okay. I don't want you to be late to your next one. I'm going to throw it out there. I would even love to have you on another episode. I feel like there's more to explore.
I can talk about this all day long.
I really appreciate, I speak for everyone. We really, really appreciate you coming on. We post these after that. You'll be able to see the comment thread. And then something we really want to do is we want to continue these discussions. And so we've kind of played with different platforms. Right now, we're really using LinkedIn because that's where a lot of our members are living. And so when we post this episode on LinkedIn, I'm hoping that we are able to generate a comment thread on that post, and then maybe even people can comment. And you might even be able to respond to people's comments. That's kind of one of my own goals with FlareVet. And then I wanted to pose it to John, Bill, myself, Chris, if you guys want to hang on for a few minutes just to like kind of wrap this up. But again, Emily, I really don't want to make you late to your social work.
Thank you. And I wanted to just like drop, because I think I saw some people were asking for my contact info if they wanted to get in touch with me. So just super quickly, my website is Boop Veterinary Consulting, like Boop the Snoot. Totally did that on purpose. And then my email is emily@boopveterinaryconsulting.com. That's a great way to reach me. And I'm so excited to keep this conversation. I can't wait to like go back and like in the comments. This was a joy. This was a joy. Thank you.
I really
having
appreciate
me.
you coming on. Yep.
This
Thank
was a
you so
delight.
much. It was great. Yeah, good conversation. Thanks for all the
Thanks.
practical tips, like the armpit and the going like this, you know, and all that stuff. I'm gonna try.
I like the practical stuff. It's like we got to have things that are portable, you know, take on the road.
For sure. Appreciate it. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Bye, folks.
Thank you
Bye.
so much.
Thanks.
So I think, Mark, for me, it's like something you've always said. Like if we help one person, I think it's worth it. You know, if it's one person that it's like, dude, like that thing you said was helpful, and I'm happier now, and I can get through some things.
I'm gonna do that. I'm gonna do the inflatable guy thing because, like, I mean, I go through that even though I'm not practicing anymore. That with my software projects, where I'm like so stressed about this Easy Vet project I'm working on, I'm gonna do the thing. You know, like, you know, I think like I already can see
I want that
myself.
to be the logo of the Easy Vet project, like the
Would be the guy like swaying.
the arms up. Yeah,
I
that's
just
what I
like-
want. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I don't want to. Let's not say bad things about Easy Vet. But just any PIMS project, any management project, you have a big caseload. I thought she had so many great little tips and pointers. And then again, what she said at the beginning about, it really wasn't a pointed question, I don't think, from Suzanne or from me, about like this, what gives you hope? This, like FlareVet, that's a credit to
I
you,
didn't
John.
expect that. I
wasn't trying to push
like,
her that way at all. I thought thinking,
she was,
you know.
I thought she was gonna say like, I don't know, God, I don't know, like, but no, it's FlareVet, right? It's like, wow, that's pretty cool. We should
Just the fact that this exists, that I love that people are coming. We've had some regular Oscar and Mike and Liz, like people that are coming regularly now. And Oscar made a really good point about, I saw this recently, that you can go live on LinkedIn. I think that's a good idea for us to explore at some point. But no, I mean, such awesome comments, such awesome questions. I thought she was fantastic.